I sometimes get caught up comparing myself to others. So-and-so's achieved more in their career, they're making better videos than I am, better music, etc. And if you're here watching this video, then I'm guessing that you've maybe had a similar experience. I've also found some people, some ideas, some concepts that help me snap out of this a little bit more quickly when I do get into these kind of thinking patterns. Now, I'm not saying that once you implement these things, this is never going to happen again. That's not the case for me. I'm not saying there's never going to be another fire. What I'm saying is that I'm giving you a fire extinguisher to control the damage the next time this maybe happens. Number 1, macro patience, micro speed. Now, this is an idea that I took from Gary Vee or Gary Vaynerchuk. So let's look at a clip that I think encapsulates this idea perfectly.
On your day-to-day work, you have to be fast with the clients. They email you, you email them back. Like your day-to-day, but your vision, what you want to achieve in life, you're not going to build it in 1 year. And so many people have it reversed. In the day-to-day, they're slow. And in the macro, they want their business to be huge the next day.
This is certainly a thinking trap that I've fallen into in the past. Maybe I'll look at a video or listen to a piece of music and think, I have no idea where I'd even start trying to make something like that. That's just not a skill that I have. And then you feel kind of inferior and you feel kind of upset about this lack of skills that you have. However, when I heard Gary Vee talking about this, it sort of brought to mind that idea of, okay, maybe I don't know how to do that right now, but the majority of people over a year or 2 years are going to give up. And the people that I'm looking at that can do it didn't give up. So it's not about being able to do it next month. It's about being able to stick with it for a couple of years, and then I'll be able to do it. If you watch any of Gary's videos or listen to his podcasts, you'll very quickly get the sense that he doesn't hesitate over details and he doesn't want to get things perfect. He just wants to be moving forward. So relating that back to music production or making videos, just make sure that you're sitting down and you're making the time and you're focusing on things that you're not particularly good at, but you want to get better at. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the perfect course, the perfect plan. Just as long as you're taking action, you're heading in the right direction. So stick with it. Number 2, be so good they can't ignore you. Now, this has been something that I've been doing a lot of thinking about personally recently, in terms of, right, what skills do I have? What hard skills do I have that I can show someone a piece of work and say, I can do this? Or someone says, I need this, and I could say, I can do that. This sort of comes down to soft skills versus hard skills. Soft skills being communication or intuition, things like that. Whereas hard skills are coding, video production, audio production, things like that, sort of things that produce a tangible result. An example of a hard skill is coding, and that's something that I'm trying to learn myself at the moment. Basic HTML, CSS. I want to build sort of decent looking websites. And when I look through YouTube videos and tutorials and I see sort of people creating these amazing looking websites, I just get intimidated and sort of overwhelmed as to where to start. Thankfully, I came across some of Cal's content and this idea, be so good they can't ignore you. Now, I can't do anything about the fact that at the moment I don't know how to code and other people are really good about it. What I can do is focus instead of looking at other people and what they can do and what I can't, instead focus on what I can do, again, over the long term in terms of being so good that I can't be ignored. I can't do that by just looking at other people and wishing and flip-flopping from tutorial to tutorial. I can make a plan and invest in it over the long term to become a better coder. I just find a lot of comfort in that idea that we are learning machines, and some people learn quicker than others, but ultimately if you stick with it, you can learn pretty much anything. For me personally, I think this ties quite closely into self-esteem, and that was highlighted when in James Clear's email newsletter, which is fantastic, he had a really good quote about self-esteem from the book Tribe of Mentors. Self-esteem is just the reputation that you have with yourself. You'll always know. That idea that you can't hide from yourself, I think, is scary and liberating in equal measure. If you are just sitting there sort of ruminating and you're not doing anything about it, your self-esteem is going to drop because you know you're not doing anything productive about it. Whereas if you're sitting down and you're putting the work in, even if you're not making huge leaps and bounds. And even if you're still watching Netflix from time to time, you'll know that you're putting in the effort and you're moving in the right direction. And ultimately, the whole point of this video is we're trying to feel better about ourselves and what we can do. And self-esteem is a huge part of that. So you can't cheat yourself, basically. If you're putting in the work, even small amounts of work on a consistent basis, that's going to do wonders for your self-esteem. And I think that's a really, really key point. So that might naturally beg the question, how do you become so good they can't ignore you? That was one of Cal's first books. And the second book answered that, and it's called Deep Work. But let's have a little bit of a watch of this clip where he talks about it in a bit more depth.
How do people do that? How do they become so good they can't be ignored?
Well, I mean, I say you should look to, let's say, professional musicians, professional athletes, professional chess players, people who have to get good in a world that has a well-defined competence hierarchy, where you have a chess ranking and you can't run away from it. You have a batting average, right? You know, like you can't get away from it. Watch how they train. Because in their world, there's a lot of effort that has gone into how do you systematically improve. And what you see is that they deliberately practice. And there's really no shortcut to deliberate practice to gaining mastery.
Number 3 is brain training. Now, to go back to the fire analogy, this is more of sort of an ongoing fire risk assessment than a fire extinguisher that you can pull out at any moment. It's sort of an ongoing thing that I try to practice and have done so pretty well on and off over the last 3 or 4 years with. So the idea here is I'm trying to build 3 mental skills or psychological skills that help me respond more skillfully to things like this. First, clarity, concentration, and equanimity. If you have clarity, then you know what's going on in your mind at any one time. I think it's impossible to always have clarity, but to be able to sort of snap back and realize, I'm ruminating on people that can do better than me, that's not productive. Just having that clarity allows you to do something about it. If you're constantly on autopilot and your mind is running the show and you're not even aware of it, then you don't really have a stab in the dark at changing it. Number 2, concentration. That comes into the deliberate practice that Cal Newport was talking about. You know, if you want to get better at music production or coding, you're going to have to concentrate. And I think in this day and age in particular, where we're more distracted than ever, phones are pinging, watches are pinging, websites and emails are just constantly pinging. If you can train the ability to concentrate, then you have a serious advantage in this current climate. And number 3, probably the most obscure one, is equanimity. And the way that teacher Jeff Warren talks about this, which I really, really like, is just sort of having a solid stance and avoiding grasping for things like the skills that you don't currently have, and also not being fazed by things that are coming your way. It's being sort of okay with everything. This is something that I find quite difficult to articulate well, so apologies, that's a little bit vague. But the way that I train these 3 skills is using mindfulness meditation. Now that you might have a bit of a gag reflex to the word meditation or mindfulness, but you can substitute that out for brain training or attention training or real sort of psychological training in these 3 skills that have a noticeable impact on your mental health and your general well-being. I use the app Calm, and if you go and have a look at that, then I highly recommend, first of all, the 7 Days of Calm. That's a free introductory course. And then Jeff Warren, who's a really funny, engaging teacher and strips away the ponchos and the pan flutes from meditation and makes it actionable. He's got a series on there called 30 Days Learning How to Meditate, something along those lines, which is really, really good. So there we go. I hope that's been helpful. Some of the topics that I've touched on today kind of relate to mental health. So if that's something that you're struggling with, I wanted to share some resources for you. I'm obviously not trained to give that, so I wanted to point you on to some helpful resources if you feel like that's something that you are struggling with. There's plenty of help out there. You're absolutely not alone with it. It's been great spending a bit of time with you today. I really hope to see you again soon. Take care.